Recently I decided to read the book of Joshua a couple weeks ago. One of my favorite verses comes out of Joshua, especially after seeing the movie Courageous, which we all watched in here that one day. As for me and my family, we will serve the Lord. Joshua 24:15, the very end of it. And it's just always been a favorite of mine. So I decided it was high time that I read the rest of Joshua, because you can't just memorize one verse. Well, when I started reading it, it actually disturbed me. I had a hard time comprehending why our God would do such things. It threw me for a loop. When the Israelites took Jericho, they did something that is unimaginable to our Western and Christian way of thinking. It seemed to contradict everything that Christ taught us. Joshua 6:20-21 says, "When the trumpet sounded, the army shouted, and at the sound of the trumpet, when the men gave a loud shout, the wall collapsed. So everyone charged straight in, and they took the city. They devoted the city to the Lord, and destroyed with the sword every living thing in it, men and women, young and old, cattle, sheep, and donkeys." If this were to happen today, we would just be stunned. We would be blown away. It would make the news. They would be criminalized. They would just be treated horribly for this. And so it kind of threw me, because to our way of thinking, that's a terrible thing, to kill the young and the old. So I won't deny, I was thrown for a loop for a little while, and I had to look into this more. This sort of slaughter takes place all throughout the book of Joshua. I won't deny, I had a hard time with it. Why would the God that we are taught is all about compassion do such a thing? How could he order the slaughter of women and children? This had to be some sort of mistake. Maybe I was reading it wrong. Either that, or maybe Joshua was just a loony and he couldn't really be receiving instruction from God. This just was something that was beyond my comprehension. So, something I had to get right with. I had to do a little research on this one, because I just couldn't seem to settle this one. Well, I decided it was time to get in there and do a little research other than in the Bible, because I was confused by what I read. So what I did was, I grabbed up the Bible that Fran and Sharon gave me when I first became an elder, because it has a lot of instruction and a lot of background on the stories, on the books of the Bible. But this time it didn't really make me feel better. And maybe I was wrong. I was seeking comfort in something I read, and maybe I should have just sought the instruction. But I decided I had to look a little more, so I went to the internet. Well, after a little reading, I started to realize how deplorable the Canaanites were. They were terrible people. First lesson learned, skipping around in the Old Testament will leave holes in the story. Might be a little confused. Had I read Leviticus 18 alone, I would have understood how many disgusting things the Canaanites did. Might have been a little more comfortable with it. But to me, this still didn't justify the killing of children. So, as I started to research more, I started to realize one more thing. The Canaanites had 40 years in which to change their ways during the time Moses was wandering the desert. And they didn't change their ways. And because of their disgusting habits, things like child sacrifice, they were kind of viewed as like a virus to the planet. They were spreading and they did horrible things and they had to be eliminated. But I still couldn't deal with the killing of women and children. Just to our Western society, this was wrong to me. But there had to be something more to it. I mean, I couldn't take discomfort in the Bible. I couldn't be put off by the Bible. So I had to do a little more research. So I think if it had just been done by a natural act, some sort of natural disaster, if God had used an earthquake to swallow up the city of Jericho, I probably would have been fine with that, rather than him using the Israelites to kill them. One expects an act of nature to kill indiscriminately. Always does. But does it matter? Does it matter how the act occurred? The fact that it occurred is all that really matters, whether he used people or he used an act of nature to kill off the Canaanites. Still serve the same purpose. So who am I to judge, really? This could also be viewed as a test of faith. I mean, if God told one of us to do such a thing, could we do it? Most of us, probably not. But they did it. They did what they were told. They did what God commanded them. So it still served the same purpose as an act of nature, but it was done with people to test somebody's faith as well. One of the websites that I read likened it to the fall of Jericho to World War II. In Japan, what was it that ended the war? It was the dropping of the atomic bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Never had a problem with this tactic in the war. Never really bothered me that much. Probably because it was well before I was in the picture, but I could deal with that. So now I'm okay with us killing indiscriminately, but not at the orders of God? How could I find what we do acceptable, but not what God does? It's not right. Again, I'm still doing something wrong. I think lesson 2 for me was don't judge God. It seems pretty obvious of a statement now, but a minute ago it's what I was doing. And I looked out there and I saw a couple faces as I was describing it. There's a few people just as confused as I was that something that atrocious could happen. As a matter of fact, the book of Joshua is frequently used as evidence against Christians and Christianity when they want to argue the cruelties done in the name of Christianity or the perceived cruelties of the Bible. This, of course, is judging God by human standards, something we should never do, which, after looking into it, it's a common mistake, actually, to judge God by human standards. He's God. He knows way more than us. He sees all that's happening as we see our little picture. It's even spoken of in the New Testament. John 8:12 through 18 says, dispute over Jesus' testimony. When Jesus spoke again to the people, he said, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. The Pharisees challenged him. Here you are appearing as your own witness. Your testimony is not valid. Jesus answered, even if I testify on my own behalf, my testimony is valid. For I know where I came from and where I am going. But you have no idea where I come from or where I am going. You judge by human standards. I pass judgment on no one. But if I do judge, my decisions are true because I am not alone. I stand with the Father who sent me. In your own law, it is written that the testimony of 2 witnesses is true. I am one who testifies for myself. My other witness is the Father who sent me. So Jesus tells us not to judge God by human standards. We're far too flawed to think of it that way. We have no comprehension. So, even Jesus says that we judge by human standards, but who are we to hold God, our Creator, to human standards? The other reason I bring this up is in light of the recent circumstances, as Anita discussed, Hurricane Sandy. With Hurricane Sandy hitting the New York City region and causing massive amounts of devastation, there's a lot of questioning of God. I see posts on the internet where people offer up prayers, others blame the storm on God. Then there are certainly those in that region questioning where God was when they lost family members, when they lost their homes. It's always a common question. Where was He? Why could He abandon us like this? There are people asking why He let it happen. As if He just let it happen and not really got involved and made it happen, but just let it occur. There are certain to be people asking this question everywhere. We often call these things acts of God. A storm, we call it an act of God. But God did not make the hurricane hit these regions with such ferocity. In a way, yes, they are acts of God, but only because God created the earth and the laws of nature. So yes, in a weird sort of way, yes, we could say they are acts of God. A lot of Christians assume it is because someone did something wrong, as with Sodom and Gomorrah and the Great Flood. And a lot of us could look at that region and say, yeah, they are definitely full of sinners, and we could call it a judgment of God. But there are a lot of good people too, and even in Sodom and Gomorrah, He said, if you could find 10 people who are without sin, He would spare it. He was even bargained with. I'm pretty sure there were more than 10 people who were without sin, or nobody's without sin, but 10 people worthy of being spared. But I truly believe that's not the case. Did God not allow the devil to do terrible things to Job? Job had done nothing wrong. It was simply a test of his faith. Job even had people comfort him and tell him he must have done something wrong. But Job never lost his faith. Could these acts not also be a test of our faith? All of these things are truly a test of our faith. Who could be tested more than the Israelites when they stormed Jericho, asked to kill indiscriminately? I can't think of any greater test. But God uses these terrible acts of nature to bring more people to His church. For one, it gives people in the church a chance to shine and show others mercy and love. There are many churches who became active down there, performing charity, helping people, feeding people, bringing them supplies. It gives us a chance. When disasters happen, that's when we shine the best. Humans alone, especially Christians, that's when we truly come out as a show of force. And we set the example for others. They see it. People realize it. It also sets an example for those who are to become closer to God. You realize at a moment's notice, your time could be up. It's kind of a chance to realize, whoa, I better get right with God. That storm barely missed me. It's a kind of a warning. I mean, we all hear these warnings now and then. We get little warnings. How many times have people been almost in a traffic accident? You're kind of oblivious. You're playing along with the music, not really paying attention. Woo! You buzzed a stop sign, didn't even notice it. It's kind of a warning to you. You become a little more alert for a while, don't you? You start watching, you're like, oh, Or you see that cop and you look down the speedometer and you're doing 75 into 65. You're like, oh, let me back off a little bit. He let me go. That was a warning. I'm going to be a little more alert. You wake up when you hit the road ridges on the side of the highway. I've done that one a few times. But it's kind of God's warning to us. Hey, get with the program. You need to wake up. God throughout the Bible gives people a chance to change their ways. Ezekiel 18:21-23 says, "But if a wicked person turns away from all the sins they have committed and keeps all my decrees and does what is just and right, that person will surely live. They will not die. None of the offenses they have committed will be remembered against them. Because of the righteous things they have done, they will live. Do I take any pleasure in the death of the wicked, declares the sovereign Lord? Rather, am I not pleased when they turn from their wicked ways and live?" So we all get these indicators. Even the rapture itself will be a chance for others to awaken and realize what they've done. When all of us disappear, people realize, whoa, I think I missed the boat. They're going to quick try to get a ticket for the next boat, right? At least I think so. I hope so. But it's a huge hint to change your ways. I don't know who's read the Left Behind series, but it's definitely an indicator to change your ways when all of a sudden everybody's gone. But this just goes to show that there are reasons behind everything that God does. Even if we may not understand it. We're not meant to understand it. It's too great of a purpose for us to understand. We can only take our little piece of the pie. I can't remember the other verse that says some of us are the eye, we're the hands, we're the feet, we're all a part of a greater body. But the one doesn't know what the other one is doing without something guiding it. And that's where God is guiding us. We may not always understand what He's thinking, what His purpose is. We know what His purpose is, but we don't always know where He's leading us. We just know we got to follow. Sometimes we have to just think about things, say, hey, this is where He wants us to go. It may not be what we see as right or wrong, but we're not to judge. Certainly we will not always understand His reasoning. One of the worst things that we can do is judge God with human standards. God is above all judgment from us. As it says in Romans 2:28, "And we know that in all things God works for the good to those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose." We have been called according to His purpose. Sometimes His purpose may not be clear and we just have to face those challenges. We may have to witness things that we don't like. It's not our call. We just kind of have to follow it. That's why we have faith. Faith is belief in something without proof. Sometimes we just have to act on faith. So I know now and then we'll read something, we'll see something challenging, as Anita said. People lose their homes, people lose children, people lose loved ones, people lose everything. There's a purpose. We may not always understand what it is. We can just do our best as Christians to support them, help them out, and act on our faith. Amen.